and welcome to vChat number 42. My name is David Davis from VMwareVideos.com and ActualTech.io.
And I'm Simon Seagrave from TechHead.co.
And we're excited to have a special guest today on this vChat edition. Our special guest is Mr. Dan Appleman. Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, so I am a developer. I'm currently the CTO at a company called Full Circle Insights. I started out most of my career on Microsoft Windows. So I was a Windows platform developer back in the Visual Basic days, C#, Visual Basic.NET, component vendor, the whole works. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I was sort of bored and got dragged kicking and screaming into the Salesforce world. So now I'm doing the same kinds of things I used to do in the Windows world, writing books, speaking courses, and so on, except I'm doing it on the Salesforce platform. So definitely 100% now in the cloud.
So, some of the infrastructure folks out here who are in our audience, they might be wondering, hey, Dan is obviously a developer. He's an application guy. Why is he on the vChat today? And that's because Simon and I have so many application questions. I mean, there's DevOps, there's containers, there's automation. We're all interested. We're all excited in that stuff. And that's why we wanted to have someone as talented in those areas as Dan on the vChat today to help us answer developer and application questions for us infrastructure folks. So thanks so much, Dan, for being on today. Simon, you want to kick off some of the questions for Dan?
Yeah, definitely. As David said, I mean, I'm an infrastructure guy from way back. Well, actually, truth be known, I started my career as a developer back in 93, 94. As with Dan, as a Visual Basic developer, also in Delphi, which I believe is no more, back in the Windows development days. So I started as a developer, and I was a developer for a couple of years before making that transition across to infrastructure. Yeah, I've always wanted to keep my hand in, as it were, with development, but obviously you need to invest time in that, and life takes over, you don't have time. So, I mean, there's a massive shift these days, obviously, from on-premise type applications to more cloud-based applications. So David and I, we were talking about that, and that's where we thought, it'd be fantastic to get someone like Dan on here that could answer these, as David said, these sort of questions, because I've got a ton of them, and I wouldn't mind sort of upskilling myself again in the areas of at least an appreciation of this sort of new generation of application development. So, yeah, I mean, Dan, you're an author, we see, and also you've got some great courses on Pluralsight as well around that. And I was reading your blog the other day, and I see that you had an article there from last year, and it was a Pluralsight campfire tale. That was a good read, and on there it spoke about how all these Visual Basic and C# developers were basically no more. They were sort of becoming extinct almost. With this new generation of development platforms coming through, which sort of ties in with one of your courses you've done as well, which is the Learning Technology in the Information Age, where we look at, well, I know when I was going through, when I started my IT career, it was easy to path out, I'm going to do these courses, I'm going to be a Windows guy, I want to be a CCNA, Cisco guy, or whatever. These days, it's much harder to do that. So with all that sort of in mind about, technologies, some of them are become obsolete or are becoming more obsolete. Some are becoming more prevalent. Do you want to walk us through, what are some of the more prevalent technologies? If we were starting out, or if we wanted to learn more about it, what technologies or products should we be looking for? And what are your thoughts on that shift as well?
Well, first of all, I don't know that there's that big a separation between developer and technology, right? Certainly, I would not say I'm an infrastructure guy. Nevertheless, I've been building my own machines since early days, and even now, I recently launched a website, a Salesforce-specific custom search. So it's called searchtheforce.com, because it was, Google was just too broad a range. You wanted to look for something related to the Salesforce platform, and you'd get things that were completely irrelevant. So I've been a big fan of Google Custom Search. I built a Google Custom Search engine, and the way I deployed it was by creating an Ubuntu server, again, on the cloud, EC2 instance, and using the AWS infrastructure. And this, of course, is one of the huge differences between earlier in the career, where before, if you wanted to launch a website, if you wanted to do load balancing, if you wanted to do anything, you would actually have to create your own servers and wire up your network cards and have it somewhere, or pay someone else to do it in a data center. And now you can literally create a complete virtual network with virtual hardware and everything you can possibly imagine just from your keyboard. So, when you deploy a complex network on AWS, are you building infrastructure or are you doing development, right? It's all a keyboard, right? Nobody's touching any hardware anymore. So I think those lines are really blurred. And I think that is, one of the transitions. And the other transition is that most people, when creating an application today, think cloud first, right? I mean, there are desktop applications, but that's not where the real excitement is, I think. People, if you're building a web application, you're building software as a service, or you're building platform as a service, or you're building virtual machines, but you're very rarely assembling hardware or managing your own servers unless they're virtual. And you're also thinking mobile, right? Hardly anyone, I think, creates a pure desktop application now. Everything has to also have a mobile component. And these are fairly recent transitions, and they're huge.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those ones, I think mobile is quite often overlooked, but I mean, I haven't got any stats to hand or anything like that, but the use of applications on mobile devices is huge now, isn't it? I mean, definitely, like you say, if you're going out there as a company or a business to develop an application, yes, you'd look for cloud, but definitely, well, I wouldn't say secondly, but equally, you would look at, if it's applicable or appropriate, look at creating a mobile-based app at the same time. Which is interesting. What sort of, like you mentioned there, it's the cost to entry now to spinning up an infrastructure is obviously a lot quicker and B, a lot cheaper. But how's it sort of shifted from developing those applications? What would you use to develop those apps now versus the old days where you'd perhaps doing a 3-tier on-premise type application with maybe your web server front end, your database, and then your server tier there, or your file store or similar, or application tier rather. Sorry. How's that differed now? What sort of programming languages or technologies would you be looking at using?
Well, your software architecture is still going to be tiered, right? I mean, I think the popular term now is MVC, Model View Controller, or variations thereof. Again, the difference is that the different tiers are virtual and they may not be the same system. So, for example, the database for my site is not sitting on the same virtual machine as the application itself, right? Because Amazon, for example, has specialized database virtual machines. So I don't know that the language is really that important. People get very religious about languages. Should it be in C#, ASP.NET? Should it be in PHP? Should it be on whatever it is? And what I always tell people is that the language choice is actually relatively simple, and that you should choose the dominant language on whatever platform you're writing for. And the reason you should choose the dominant language has to do with long-term maintainability. And in fact, that's my most recent course on Pluralsight is how to build maintainable applications. And the idea there is that if you pick an esoteric language or something that's hot, new, and exciting, but has still very little usage and very little history, you run a serious risk that 5 years from now, that language will go out of style. There won't be as many people supporting it. And that's something to really care about, is how are you going to support the language 5 years from now? Are you going to be able to hire people? So astonishingly enough, PHP is still a good choice. It's still a hugely popular language. And you can find PHP developers everywhere, and it has some proven history. So
yeah, it's a bit like you mentioning that. I mean, it's not a good comparison at all. But I remember, as we probably as we all do, in 99 there with Y2K coming up, obviously there was a lot of global concern around a lot of the applications that were only intended to be developed for and used for a couple of years, but in the financial industry, and then obviously not, 1999 rolls round, and I know the company I was working for at the time, they were scrambling. It was a financial institution or a banking institution, and they were scrambling to find COBOL developers because those applications were developed in COBOL. And at the time, I mean, it was I wouldn't say it was a dead language, but it was a language that was, shall we say, not as popular at the time. And so trying to get your hands on a competent COBOL developer to go in there and check all your code was actually quite hard. I mean, fantastic if you're a COBOL developer, you just name your price, obviously, at the time. But it just shows, I mean, COBOL definitely isn't an obscure language at all. That's why it wasn't a good example. But it just shows, you could fall into a same trap.
Software always lasts longer than you expect, right? And we all live with that. It's like, I wrote that as a prototype. I wrote it years ago. It's like, why does it come back and haunt me or haunt someone else? And one of the things that developers sometimes fall into is, they'll see, oh, here's great new language X, and I'm more efficient in it. Say, how much more efficient? I'm 20% faster. It's like, wow, if I can write code 20% faster, that's really exciting. Actually, it's not, because the code part of your application, if you think about your whole application lifecycle cost, your code part's 10%. So, if you save 20%, then it's like, okay, you've cut 2% off your lifecycle costs. If the consequence of that savings is an increase in 20% on your maintenance costs, and maintenance is half the lifecycle cost, you've made a terrible deal. So it's really important to choose languages based on your expectation of being able to find people and support it 5 years, 10 years from now. And I know that's a little bit surprising to some people, but that's not only theoretically correct, but long, hard experience.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, and if you had to pay the guy to write that code double what you could have paid a PHP developer to write the same code,
exactly.
There goes your increased in efficiency.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah, great points. So I mean, for people who were just getting started in coding, they want to do some automation in their infrastructure, or maybe write some basic applications. What do you tell people?
Well, infrastructure is a very broad term. So the first thing I would look at is which piece of infrastructure are you choosing? So I know a lot of people are very excited about the Cisco networking world and so on, and that's an exciting world. If you're going to be working for a large corporation or for a data center, of which there are fewer doing that. So the first thing I would say is, if you are taking the infrastructure IT path, learn AWS, learn Azure, learn Google Compute Engine, learn how to manage them, learn how to script them and control them and secure them. That's where everybody is. That's where the excitement, the demand is. Salesforce. The reason I'm in the Salesforce world, and a lot of people are saying Salesforce, that's just an application. And in fact, Salesforce is a platform now. And that's one of the big stories in the cloud world, I think, over the past 5 or 6 years, is how Salesforce has turned from this CRM application, and that's not very exciting unless you're a salesperson, to a real software development platform, which means that there are people managing it, and there are people programming against it, and a lot of people. And the reason it's exciting is because the people who use Salesforce are large companies, medium and large companies, who have lots of money. And because so many people, both developers and I expect IT folk, don't realize it's a platform and don't give it respect, so to speak, as a platform, the supply of people who work on that platform is far below what is needed, which means that, high demand, low supply, lots of money, lots of opportunity.
So Dan, one of the things I've noticed, talking about Salesforce and the Salesforce cloud, like you said, it's a lot more than a CRM. I mean, I've seen VMware's partner system. If you're a VMware partner, you log in and it's going to force.com. I've seen my local ma and pa cable company, now when I log into billing, it goes to force.com. So I've noticed more and more applications, online moving to force.com. But to be honest with you, I really don't know what force.com is. I mean, so can you tell us a little bit, for those who don't know, like what is, beyond just Salesforce as a CRM, what is the Salesforce cloud?
Okay, so the way I like to think about it is you have these different terms. First you have infrastructure as a service when you think about cloud, and that's where AWS really shines. The idea that you can set up virtual machines and you can set up virtual firewalls and virtual databases and so on. And what you're doing is you're taking the physical reality of hardware and you're just moving it into the cloud. Next thing you have is platform as a service, and platform as a service is more sort of the Docker style, where you deploy an application and all of its dependencies and so on, and they're run. So it's not really, you don't get a complete virtual machine. You don't have to worry about virtual machines because the cloud can scale it as needed, and sort of less. You care less about infrastructure. You're delegating that. Salesforce, you're getting really into the realm of software as a service. And the idea there is you don't have to think about infrastructure at all. The infrastructure is taking care of identity, it's taking care of security, it's taking care of all the resource management. And all you're doing is writing your pure application that's on this platform. And this is what Salesforce is providing. It provides the database is built in. There's a programming language. There's a lot of ability to create process without code at all, just what they call clicks, not code. And there's the ability to create rich user interfaces through Visualforce and their new Lightning infrastructure. So the reason you see people going to force.com is because if your business model fits it, and it's usually a per-user type business model, it is by far the cheapest way to create an application because it does so much for you. And I think that's why you're seeing it catch on in more and more places, because it's just, they're taking care of the infrastructure for you.
Can you give us a couple of examples of the type of applications you're seeing developed on force.com? Obviously, it sounds like it's quite a flexible language behind it. And what type of things are you seeing being developed, maybe yourself or other people are using it for?
I would say at this time, a lot of the applications are still tools and add-ons for people who are using the Salesforce application. There are an increasing number of full-featured applications, like accounting packages and so on. Basically, any application where you're sort of charging per user, right? So, which a lot of enterprise applications are like that, is a really good candidate for force.com because you can basically deploy all of their infrastructure and, charge people, and it handles all of the licensing and all the tracking and all the user identity. Think about if you're doing a user-based application, you're keeping track of users, logins, and so on. Imagine you didn't have to actually do any of the user management. You didn't have to do any of the user security, right? It was all just built in at a really fine-grained level. What a cost savings that would be. And that's why people are using it, because you don't have to think about those things.
So people may be not familiar with Salesforce because the name, I know what it is, obviously, but people listening to this perhaps don't know what Salesforce is. To me, it sounds like it was, probably a software package that tracks, sales reps' sales, or maybe sales over the internet or physical sales. Like David David's mentioned there, if it's a mom and pop shop, maybe it's a hardware store, maybe they're keeping track of their inventory, that type of thing, plus sales. I'd imagine they're the typical use cases. Any other sort of more
remember that. Yeah, that's the CRM application. That's where it started.
Yeah.
Right?
So what type of things are you seeing now, though?
So there's a lot, for example, that I see. And remember, I'm a developer, so I actually don't even come close to seeing the whole world of what people are doing out there. We're doing marketing analytics ourselves, right? So the ability to drill down and say, okay, I have a marketing campaign. Which of my marketing campaigns are generating revenue and which ones are not? So that's an example. If you have nonprofits, right, who are tracking their members, who are tracking their donors, I can imagine right now a political campaign. It would be awesome for a political campaign to be able to track everyone, and you can literally just in the database do a query search, say, give me a list of all my donors who contribute more than this, who live within a 10-mile radius of here. So, bring them in for a meeting, and you can do this incredibly easily, right? Because it's all just there on the platform. So originally it was a CRM application, but they've essentially turned it into a platform. And again, you can go to the Salesforce App Exchange, appexchange.com, and you can see a list of all of the different kinds of applications that are available that run on the platform. So,
I mean, they must be doing something right because I know their Dreamforce conference, they're saying it's the largest software conference on Earth with over 150,000 attendees.
Wow, 150,000?
Yeah,
it is a zoo. I'm speaking at Dreamforce again this year, and it's just
150,000. My gosh, that's huge. I mean, the largest conference I've been to is probably Oracle Open World, and that's 45,000 when I went a couple of years ago. And I thought that was big.
Isn't Dreamforce the one in San Francisco where they bring in the cruise ship to house all the attendees?
Yeah, I don't think they have a cruise ship this year, but they fill up Moscone and pretty much every conference space anywhere near the downtown. They fill up every hotel in the city.
They block off the streets even, right?
They block off Howard Street.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. I mostly live in Moscone West, which is the developer zone, so I don't even see most of the conference.
Wow, that's impressive. I can only imagine it was an absolute zoo at Oracle Open World with 45,000 people. So I can't even begin to fathom what it'd be like with 3 times the amount of people. I mean, wow, that's mind blowing.
So Dan, if somebody wanted to learn, how to develop on Force.com, have you created resources, or what resources do you recommend?
So there are a lot of resources. If you're actually just curious about that world, there's a Pluralsight course there on Salesforce careers that I created before last Dreamforce, and it talks about the opportunities, and it talks about how does one get started and what are the different tracks. So, for example, there would be one track for someone who is, say, not a developer, who's coming in maybe from the IT world, who wants to become an admin and learn that side of it, and then maybe move into development later. But there's a completely different track that if you're an experienced software developer, that you would come in, learn certain skills, and sort of almost learn things backwards, and then go on and learn some of the admin capabilities later. So I talk all about that. They have tons of resources at developer.force.com. The development org for experimenting and learning and doing development is free. The tooling is free. So there's definitely a real push to get more developers interested in the platform. They have a learning system called Trailhead, which is just more fun than any learning system you're going to find anywhere else. So, lots of resources for those who are interested in it.
Nice. And I mean, speaking of your Pluralsight courses, I watched most of amazing things you can do with a web browser and a bit of code, which I thought was really cool because it was a high school or college age student on there. And basically, it was like you and him going back and forth and talking and actually showing me some really cool stuff that I didn't know that you can do with a web browser.
Yeah, he was the teacher. I was the student.
I like that. That. And I mean, I've got a couple boys and I want to teach them how to code. So I was like really interested in all the things that this young man, was able to kind of teach you. It was really cool. But you've got a lot of other cool courses, like you want to be an entrepreneur, career and survival strategies for software developers. I'm interested in the dark side of technology careers. It reminds me of Star Wars. And the future of technology careers. Do you want to talk a little bit about any of those courses?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually funny. So a lot of my courses are in the career space. And when I became a Pluralsight author, first I did a Salesforce course because that's sort of what they recruited me to do. And after that, I said, I want to do something that's sort of more broad that can help people in general. And I proposed this course, Career and Survival Strategies for Software Developers. And they sort of looked at me and say, "Oh, we've never done anything like that before," but said, "Okay, well, experiment. We'll try it." And it was incredibly successful. I mean, people loved it because, as developers, and I'm sure this is true for infrastructure people as well, we so focus on tech and we talk to each other about tech, and it's all tech, 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 that sometimes we sort of forget we're human beings, right? And we have career concerns, and especially now with the rapid pace of technology change, there's fear. It's like, how am I going to catch up? How am I going to keep up? How am I going to learn what I need to learn? These people coming out of school who have the latest technology and they know things I don't know. How am I going to keep my job? Because they make less than me. So this is universal, right? I would speak at conferences back when I was doing the Microsoft conferences, and I gradually noticed this shift where at the beginning, people were there because they were really excited about learning and having fun. And towards the end of my time in the Microsoft conference world, I really got the sense that people were there out of sheer terror. It's like I have to learn this latest, greatest stuff or I'm going to be in trouble. When it turns out that you actually don't want to be learning the latest and greatest stuff. I talk about this in the course on learning technology in the information age. Learning the bleeding edge stuff, learning the leading stuff is incredibly inefficient. It's a waste of time because you're struggling when there aren't books out yet. There isn't a lot of information out there yet. It's so much better to wait, 6 months or a year, when all the resources are there, all the people who struggled with the new material have digested it and sort of put it out in a more easily to understand manner. There are already hundreds of thousands of questions out on Stack Overflow and on the forums and so on. It's so much easier to learn if you wait 6 months. So the only people who should be experimenting and learning the very latest and newest stuff are the people who are focused on training and writing books and doing that. Everybody else can wait. And that's just a pure, in terms of efficient use of your time. And, it's radical to say that, but, do yourself a favor. Don't learn the newest stuff. And you say, oh, well, the companies need it. No, the companies don't, right? Enterprises, they move slowly. You come in and say, I want to adopt this new thing. Say, well, what we have is working. Why would we want to adopt that? But it's exciting as soon. Well, what we have is working. That's going to cost money. Have you checked it out? Is it secure? Is it proven? So they'll discuss it and debate it and budget for it. And a year later, you're going to deploy it. So what's the rush, right?
Definitely. And just wondering, Dan, what in the context of that, what sort of have you seen any shifts over perhaps like the last decade or so? Obviously, as technology, at least my perception is, it seems to get faster and faster, and you seem to be able to keep up with it less and less as time goes on. There's more to digest and learn. Have you seen any sort of shifts at all, maybe in the last few years? I mean, with the advent of, firstly, going from client-server architecture through to virtualization, now through to sort of cloud, whether it be public, hybrid, or private. Has that had any impact, do you think?
It's had an impact, but not what you're thinking. So, I believe, and I'm absolutely convinced of this, that we are going through something that is roughly equivalent to the Industrial Revolution. And I know people say that all the time. It's revolution, information revolution, and so on. But people don't necessarily think about what that really means. And the way I describe it is that there are two fundamental core changes to the world, right? Things that have never existed before. And the first one is that knowledge has become devalued, right? We are not a knowledge society, right? The whole concept of gaining knowledge is obsolete because knowledge is free, right? Everything. This is the first time in all human history that pretty much all knowledge, all human knowledge, anything you ever want to know is there instantly at no cost. So that is a fundamental shift in the human condition, and the consequences of it we're only beginning to understand. And the other big shift is that it is now possible, again, for the first time in human history, for anyone to communicate with and engage in commerce with anyone else on the planet for no cost. Again, right? We can do things like this. So what are the consequences of these things? Right? And we're beginning to see what those consequences are. And we're only at the beginning of this transition. One of the big ones has to do with the field of education, which is, well, if knowledge is free, where's the value, right? And I would argue that the value is skills, right? Knowledge itself, knowing something, has no value. Being able to take knowledge and do something with it is valuable. So if your education is focused on learning things, no good. If your education is focused on doing things, taking that knowledge and actually gaining real skills that you can accomplish something with that knowledge, then you have a future, right? Skills win. In terms of the communication and commerce side, that's a little bit tricky, right? I think we're still figuring that one out. One is, I think, potentially an increase in entrepreneurship, right? I know more people who are making money on the side or doing little gigs, right? You know, when anybody can literally in minutes start selling something on the internet to the whole world, that's staggering, right? There's a little sports store near here that they were selling sporting goods. And it was a little store, and I went in and say, well, how are you doing? Say, we're doing fine. Say, 80% of our business is online. Yeah, they had a storefront, but that's not where their business was. They were shipping sporting goods all over the world, right? So this is huge, right? This is the big change. And, I think here in the U.S., we're beginning to see another interesting consequence of it, which is why has our political system gone insane, right? And, you're in Britain, Simon, and I think you would agree. You've had your own forms of
yeah.
Right? And arguably one of the reasons is that the internet, right, where we all spend so much of our time, what gets surfaced? Well, what gets surfaced more than anything else are things that attract clicks, right? Because it's advertising. What attracts clicks? Extremist views, extremist headlines attract clicks. So what you see is a surfacing, basically moderation vanishes because nobody clicks on it. So you see a surfacing in a world, our perceived world becomes more and more us against them, left, right, extremists of different kinds, a world of conflict, because that's what sells clicks. So we're beginning to see that. And, when I look, people say, well, why have things become so extreme everywhere? One could arguably say because that's what we're seeing. That's the world that we now live in. It's all extreme because that's what sells clicks.
Well, the other thing is as well, in the media, you've got a lot more different media streams to choose from now, whether it's going through traditional media channels such as over here, BBC or Fox or whoever, whoever your big national broadcaster is, versus, you can go on things like Twitter. I mean, I've seen events being announced on Twitter, 15, 20, sometimes 30 minutes before it even hits the headlines of a traditional news organization. So right. The way of assimilating all that information out there is, definitely much more broad. And like you say, I totally agree. I think I think they will end up calling it the information age or something equivalent to that, because it is. Mm-hmm. It's never before have we been able to sort of digest, share, views, data, information, that the whole works so efficiently, and even in the last, like you say, what we're doing at the moment, I mean, if we'd done this 4 years ago, we'd be paying for the service because this would be a business service because there's 3 of us on there, but now it's free. I'm a remote worker. I work in a little town of 5,000 people, but I work for a global IT company. For a US team that's thousands and thousands of miles away, and we've got lots of little shops here. And I often think, how do they survive, type of thing. And at the moment, they haven't made that mind shift yet. I mean, if I was a store owner, I would literally be, depending on what I was selling, obviously, but I would actually be relying on a online presence to sell the majority of my stuff and generate the majority of my income, but still have a storefront on in the little town here.
If I had a storefront, I'd put up a Pokestop or a lure.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's just happened in the past week, right? 2 weeks now that craziness has been going on.
Hey, well, I've got to ask the question. I've got to ask the question in that case. Who's given Pokemon Go a try yet?
I have. Yep.
I'm sorry. Guilty. I have not. There's so much noise that a lot of my focus is on triage, right? Because we have such a flood of information, such a flood of apps, such a flood of everything that, for everything that comes up, it's sort of, okay, is this worth X amount of my time? Because I have a lot of things that I need to be doing. So, and that has not reached the threshold yet, but I know about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing that this global free knowledge brings to mind, and this sort of on-demand access to everything, is the pressure that it puts on IT people. Where instead of spending millions in the data center on traditional applications and infrastructure, I mean, you could have the janitor walk in there and say, hey, why don't you put this on Force.com? I heard you could save a ton of money doing that. And so traditional IT people have to continue improving their skills and trying to keep pace and making the smart choices for the business. And so when you mention triage, I'm sure you get a lot of questions, kind of like we have here, where people are like, hey, what about this hot new development language? What about this thing over here? Why don't we do that? Do you feel is that a big thing that you, like you said, you spend your time on informing companies or other IT people, hey, this is the right path. This new technology it's like same stuff as we used before. It's not worth doing, kind of thing. Or
it's always hard to know the right path.
Right.
I remember I did a radio interview once, and the guy had been doing radio for many years, and we started talking. He said, I'm terrified. I studied to do this, and my station has all this expensive equipment, and I know that a high school student on his PC or her PC can do exactly the same thing at basically for free. So how long are they going to keep me on?
Yeah.
Right. And technology is hugely disruptive, and it's disrupting the developer space as well. It's disrupting the IT space. It's disrupting every space. So one of the tenets of the future is adaptability. And this is one of the reasons I focus on skills. It's one of the reasons I focus on interpersonal skills and leadership skills. So I have this course, again, on Pluralsight on Introduction to Leadership and Management for Developers, because I found that a lot of leadership type courses are sort of designed for more right-brained people who have a very intuitive understanding of other people. And, speaking as a developer, intuitive understanding of other people is not my strong suit. But it turns out that technical people can be phenomenal leaders and phenomenal managers if they're taught to use their skills, right? So, for example, if I'm an excellent debugger and I apply my debugging skills to human relationships, I can excel. I don't have to rely on intuitive understanding and somehow that mystic mind readings that some people are able to use. I can actually think things out and be very effective. And I feel it's very important because leadership skills, management skills, interpersonal skills are that much more important in a world where knowledge is free, right? Because, if you're looking for a job or a client and they have to choose between somebody who is a roughly equal skill sets, or even, one person's better than the other, but one person interviews better and connects better and is friendlier, they're going to pick that person every time. Every time.
Right.
Right? So learning those skills, those are timeless. Those are about the only skills you can think of that do not go obsolete, and you can actually get, as you get more experience, you get better at them. So I would say to everyone, you know what I tell people in college when they say, what internship should I have? What internship should I try to get? I say, go work at a summer camp, right? Work with the kids. Best leadership training in the world, because they're, instantly transparent, right? If you do something wrong, you know it, right? They're not hiding, they're not sulking. You can tell you did something wrong, so you can refine those leadership skills, those management skills.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, instead of learning the hot new programming language, and having more and more acronyms on your resume, learn something that never goes out of style, and you can connect with people, you can speak, you can lead, and manage
Yep.
manage people with those hot new skills if need be. But yeah,
Learn a language, learn a foreign language.
yeah,
which is always useful. I totally agree with you, Dan. I mean, I think both David and I, and we've got little ones here. My advice would be is literally, be good at communication. Learn to get on with people, irrelevant to how awkward they can be. Just learn how to get on with people, communicate, be adaptive, as you mentioned there. I mean, like you say, information is everywhere. It's easily obtained. So for that, you need to prove and show that you've got skills to actually know where to look for that information, and B, once you get that information, know how to assimilate it and apply it in a clear, methodical manner to whatever you've been tasked with or what you want to achieve. I think if you do those things, it's you can turn your hand to anything. I mean, my background, like I say, I started off straight out of university with a degree in psychology and English, and I came out as a programmer. Never looked back, and then I've moved to infrastructure and never looked back. So, it really, it's what it comes down to. I mean, a lot of the skills I learned, I mean, I had a lot of sort of part-time jobs going through university and high school, and that's where I learned a lot of interpersonal communication skills, and they're the ones that still carry me through and see me right now, and, knowing how to get on with people and what have you. And then, when you're at uni, you're doing that. I mean, the skills, I can't remember. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember half the stuff I learned there, but what the skills I still carry through are how to look for information, how to get that information, gather it, and then sort of put it into some sort of format that's easily digestible to myself or others. They're the core skills. I totally agree with you.
When I got my computer science degree, one of the courses was a writing class, Writing 39, and I asked at the time, I don't really mind, I enjoy writing, but why am I being required to have a passive writing class? It was a tough writing class to get a CS degree. Probably the single most useful course I took in college. I mean, all those books I've written now, I'm writing Pluralsight courses. I write them all. I don't do it off the cuff. I write them, I script them, so that I am able to get everything I want in there and express it the way I want. So who would have known, right?
Yeah,
it's funny where you end up.
Yeah,
and I think that's a great point. I mean, Pluralsight, people think of it as, developer training or IT pro training or creative training, but there's so many good business courses on there, like, your course on entrepreneurship or communication or career. I've seen presentation courses on there.
Yep.
I took a course on time management, on Pluralsight, which was only 45 minutes long. I thought, hey, that's a, good time management course. So yeah, I think that's a great point. I guess to wrap up this vChat on is, keeping your skills adaptive and fresh, and checking out some of your courses from Pluralsight.
And try to have fun.
Absolutely.
We get lost in the stress of the technology change and so on. If you're not having fun, what's the point?
That's right.
It's one of the reasons I really switched to Salesforce. It's fun. It's like they've got great community, great people, great technology. You go to Dreamforce, and it's just a blast, because people are there and they're really enjoying themselves. And who knows how long that will last, right? Because everything changes. But right now are the good times.
No, awesome. That's always good. And the top tip earlier there as well, anyone listening to this that's either an existing developer or just starting out or wanting to change careers as a developer, definitely check out looking at becoming a Salesforce developer. Sounds like it's very lucrative potentially, and also a lot of work there as well. So actually, a question for you, is it still is Apex the language?
Apex is the native language for Salesforce, yes.
So, anyone listening to this, definitely, check out Dan's courses there and get yourself an Apex book.
You can go to advancedapex.com, and I have a book there on advanced Apex programming.
Perfect. There we go.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on with us today, Dan.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun.
Good. Thanks, Simon, and thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.